That's lovely. Our name is sustenance. Thank you.
So this was the 90 days.
Okay. Right then, everybody, we'll start. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Hello, my name is Claire Smith, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer. We've got quite a busy agenda today for Report Out. So we've got two acute general surgery report outs. We've got some certificates, and we've got some ALT presentations as well, which is really good. Just so I don't forget, can I ask the people who received their certificates and their ALT certificates as well to stay behind at the end so we can get a photograph, please, if that's okay. So, without any more of ado, I'm actually going to pass over to Nazira, who is the process owner for Acute General Surgery Value Stream RPIW3. And this is the 120-day report. Come on.
Thanks very much, Claire. So hello, my name is Masira and I am the process owner for RPIW3 in our acute surgical admissions value stream.
Hi, I'm Chris Clark. I'm co-process owner for this value stream.
Hello, my name is Michael Adams and I was a team member on this RPIW week.
And, hello, my name is Nick. I'm one of the general surgery F1s and I've been invited to give a bit of my experience of the project we've done here.
Okay. Yep. So that's us. So yes, so quite rightly, so I have been up here maybe once or twice before and I think people have got to know me. So we are reporting out and this is 120 days and I know that may seem unusual, but I think for us we felt that there was a particular area within our RPIW that we wanted to just focus on, which was what we're doing today. So I'm not going to speak a huge amount because I'm actually up here later again, so I think it's only fair to let the rest of the team and give you a little bit of their experience of of the work that we've been doing. But for those of you who don't know, during this RPIW we've actually been looking at the flow of patients through the SAU, so the patients at the time of senior decision to admit to the time that that patient is transferred to the acute wards. And what we found is that lead time was 5 hours 50 minutes on average, and we were hoping to reduce that lead time, and we did have a target of 1 hour 42 minutes, which has been somewhat challenging, but I'm hoping that what you'll see today will show that the efforts we've made in trying to achieve that. So I'll hand over to the team.
Okay, so I just wanted to talk about a quick summary of our RPIW week and the challenges that we've faced. One of the challenges is that patients didn't know their plan on their journey through SAU, and we've put things in place to make that clearer to the patients and give them a better understanding of where they are in their journey. So on arrival to SAU, we hand out a patient pathway leaflet which identifies each stage of the process that they're going to go through, and they can follow that throughout their journey so they know exactly what's going on. We've also tried to step up intentional rounding on SAU, so it's either carried out by the health cares or the nurses or anyone that's going to be going into the bays where the patients are. So this gives the patients a chance to ask any questions that they might have and get a better understanding of what their plan is from there and what they're going to be coming up to. Another challenge that we faced was a delay in EDAN completion. This meant that patients on the acute wards, so 46 and 47, it meant they couldn't leave the wards as quick as they were able to. And to tackle that, we've introduced an acute discharge FY1, which Nick's going to talk about in a bit more detail and give you a better idea of to what that involves. We were unable to decrease our lead time as much as we would have liked to. So we didn't decrease the time as much as the target was given to us, but we've increased the efficiency of the patient's journey. So they have better quality of care, which I think is quite important. So yeah, that was unfortunate, but it did mean the quality of care was higher. I just wanted to mention as well that during this process, the relationship between SAU and the acute surgical wards, it has become better, and it's increased trust between the wards and SAU as well. I think that's quite important to mention. I just wanted to mention quickly my experience of our RPIW. So I think for anyone that doesn't quite trust the process, just believe in it, because it does work and it does make a difference. And personally, it's increased my confidence in my own ability to speak out and give opinions and try and put forward ideas for improvement. It's given me more experience of non-clinical work within the trust and a better idea of what's out there. And it's given me an opportunity to show my capabilities. So anyone that wants to get involved in RPIW Week, I would highly suggest it, because it does work and it's very valuable.
Thank you. So my role here is just to give you a bit of an insight into what it might be like being an acute surgical F1. So this is what your job list might look like after a acute surgical take. So it's going to involve a lot of urgent investigations, urgent treatments that need to be started promptly. However, what lurks within that list is some of these EDANs that also need prompt completion, as we know. Now, moving on from medical school as a student, moving on to being an F1, you're taught to prioritise the urgent clinical tasks. So unfortunately, the EDAN will fall down that priority list, and as we know, that will delay patient discharge and impede patient flow. So this is something that you only then experience as an F1 and actually realise that this is a clinical priority, because you need to get that sick patient from A&E to SAU to then move on to the ward. So we've introduced a acute discharge FY1, which has been a role that we've been shaping throughout this rotation of F1s. So Monday to Friday shift, all day, and essentially we are ward-based on 46 and 47, which is the acute surgical wards, where we devote our time solely to completing EDANs. So we don't carry a bleep, and that is our priority for those 5 days. And whenever there's time, we also support the acute colorectal and upper GI F1s, which tend to be very busy, as you would have seen on the list. Our experience of it, so we find that we complete over 10 EDANs a day. I've heard as high as 20 some days, with majority of them being completed in the morning, as they're generated by the morning ward round. And then sometimes patients are awaiting investigations before they're sent home. So we do find that we complete a large amount in the afternoon as well. We find that it's actually a really nice shift for us. There's 17 of us, and we do the shift for a week within our rotation. So it introduces more variability into the shifts. It decreases EDAN pressure on all surgical teams that have patients on those wards, as we're there, devoted to completing them. And some of the things that we've worked on is specifically performing a safe EDAN handover, so that the patient history, the outpatient medications, and also the follow-up required is safely handed over to whoever is completing that EDAN. And we've worked on the fact that we're now completely devoted to completing EDANs. Thank you. I'm going to pass you on. Chris.
Yeah. Okay. So the initial challenge of the RPIW was, as you can see, when we did the measurements of the wait state, from the point that patient TCI decision was made to actually physically transferring off the unit to the wards. Back in May, it stood at 5 hours 49 minutes. And obviously, when our sponsors set the challenge of reducing that, it was quite daunting. But again, just to echo what Mike said, really believe in the methodology of KPO, because when we had chance to take some time out and sit around and discuss everyone's ideas and thoughts, we very quickly realised that there was a lot we could do around the efficiency of communication and handover between SAU and the acute wards, as well as bringing in a dedicated EDAN doctor to do EDANs, which is what Nick's been doing. And it was from that work that, as well as the acute discharge FY1, we've also brought in a dedicated band-free acute bed manager, who coordinates all the transfers between SAU and the wards and responsible directly for all that communication. Obviously, Mike as the WEP on SAU is a big part of that. And for all that work, it's been quite a journey, but we have managed to see a 21% reduction in the initial wait state. So we're still at 4 hours 36 minutes, but the reduction of where we've come from is absolutely massive, and I think that's thanks to everyone's hard work and efforts. So moving forward, what we've been trying to do is obviously embed this as a standard model of work or business as usual, and what we feel as a team is that even though it's going to be continued vigilance and a lot of re-education, given the nature of the acute team and the rotation every couple of months, there is going to have to be that re-education. However, a lot of the lessons learned have now been fully embedded with the senior staff and those staff who are there on a more permanent basis. So there's been a great culture, a move towards a culture of shared learning and co-education. In fact, we're that confident with some of the lessons we've learned that the acute band 3 bed manager, we're actually rolling that out 24/7 now. So initially it was just a Monday to Friday daytime cover, but we're actually recruiting for that in a couple of weeks. So it'll be 24/7 in the new year. Further reductions towards wait time. What we've sat around again as a group, and we feel that within the original boundaries of this RPIW, there's probably not a huge amount more we can achieve, because the original boundaries were very much focused on SAU. And what we've realised is that yes, we've increased the efficiency of SAU. We've also off the back of that, made the patient experience a lot better. But now we need to focus on the acute wards, on getting those early discharges or transfers to other areas. So there is a plan in place to do some further PDSA work, but solely focusing on the acute wards, which ultimately will increase on the flow out from SAU. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. What we'll do is we'll go through the other presentations, then we'll ask questions at the end, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So if you've got specific questions, just lock them in your head so that we can ask the team later. So, moving on then. So, again, acute general surgery value stream, but this is Kaizen. It's Claire. Kaizen event number 1, and Claire is going to present this, theatre sister in theatres and anaesthesia. So, okay.
So my name is Claire Hutton. I'm team leader for colorectal urology and breast theatres at St James.
Hello, my name's Rachel Jenkins. I'm the team leader for acute and obstetrics here at St James's, and I was the team lead on this mini Kaizen event.
Hello, I'm Dan. I'm an ODP in acute and obstetric theatres, and I was a team member for this event.
And I'm Nasira, hello. I was a team member of this Kaizen event.
So, the initial event took place between the 23rd and the 25th of October, and it was a mini Kaizen event, and we were looking at the process of between when a patient is realised that it needs to come to theatre, so from the process of booking that patient to it actually being transferred to our acute booking board, and how that process worked. So during the event, before the event, we did 7 observations. And from this information, we had a lead time of 45 minutes and a process time of actually 5 minutes for that actual to happen, that process of booking a patient to that information going on the board. The patient value added time was only 10%, so 90% of that was non-value added time to that patient's journey. From the 3 days that we did the first event, the main things that defects that we were looking at was the booking form, whether it was completed correctly, and how many patients that were being booked then were coming back the following day for the procedure. And the other thing was we 5S'd our actual board, because we'd had that board for about a year from our initial input into it. So we thought there were certain issues that needed to be addressed regarding information that was put on the board. So from our first final day of the 3-day event, we had 0 defects on the information that was coming back on the EPOL booking form. There was 0 defect on the patients that were being booked for the following day, and we were at level 1 for our 5S'ing of our acute booking board. Claire will then discuss the 30-day part where we're at now.
So we remeasured at 30 days and on the standard booking forms. On the first one, we had 7 required cells on each booking form to make that the information that we then transferred into our system and onto our board was accurate. So we actually did have 11 measured forms for this piece of work, and out of 11, 1 was 100%, all cells completed, and on the other 10, 6 cells on each form was completed. So there was 1 piece of information missing. That piece of information that was missing was the blood results for each patient. So what was really good about it was the things that we really needed, which was dates and times and U codes, which would give us a guide of when patients were booked and when we needed to get them into the operating theatre in a timely manner. That was all being adhered to. So actually, when we worked out into a percentage, our defect came out at 14%. So we had gone from 0 to 14, but over a 30-day period, I felt that was acceptable and still a work in progress. The second defect that we measured was the TCI patients. So these are patients that come to SAU, deemed fit and safe to go home and come back the next day and readmitted back usually into our JAL admissions lounge. Prior to this, we had issues with admitting these patients into SAU. We worked with SAU to say, could we do that more timely? Because we were reliant in theatre on that information to be able to update onto our TMS system to get it into the into the process of getting the patient to theatre. Now we've looked at this, and again, we're probably about 50% now, where we are getting a lot of our patients are admitted on SAU timely, but there is still again an issue, work in progress. There's some work that we're doing with Emily Griffiths in AMS about using a virtual ward, and there's been another potential idea that's come out of this, which we're exploring at the minute, and we'll probably talk about 60 days, but there is another alternative to that. And I'm going to pass over to Dan, because he's going to do about, are you doing the board or am I doing newspaper? Oh, newspaper.
You're doing newspaper.
Oh, I've got a bit more to do, sorry, a bit more from me. So what we did when we finished doing the measures, we decided there was 3 pieces of work that we would put into our newspaper. So we're going back to the standard form that we fill in about the clinician basically travelling from the patient side to theatre to book a patient, and we felt that that was not adding any value and something that we could address quite easily. It was a quick win by putting the forms next to the patient. That's ongoing. 50%, again, we measured, were getting filled at the bedside. 50% was still coming. When we questioned that and we dug a bit deeper, it's quite cultural and habitual. So people just felt that this is what we've always done. Again, it's about a different set of doctors on different weeks of on-call. So it's getting that message through to everybody. And it works on an 8-week rotation, so we possibly haven't hit everybody as we're only 30 days in. So that's something we are, again, working with Nazira and SAU just to try to get that going. And obviously, the other thing about the booking forms is we are in the process of going electronic and doing this digitally. So there's still a piece of work going on with that. So once that happens, that will omit that completely and everything will be done digitally. So that will eventually not be so much of an issue. The second thing we did for the newspaper was, again, about the compliance with the 7 cells on each piece on each booking form. Again, it's about just ensuring that the surgeons booking, who tend to be junior doctors, understanding that by having, if the information isn't there to share, to still say that they've looked or checked, or to check on PPM plus, but by missing out the bloods is important, because for anaesthetically we need to know that information. So again, still not bad, and again 86% success. I think that's worth celebrating. The third one is you.
Second time lucky. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the acute board, which was initially brought in by Claire and Rachel about 2 years ago. Now, the acute board was initially used as a tool for communication for the acute team, so they could see the workload. But we felt during this event that we actually could make more use of this in terms of productivity and give the patient a much better experience, get more patients through and be able to see where we are missing out. So, going forward, have we got any? Have we got any? Oh, right, okay. How do I go back on that? Sorry about that. Okay, so we made a couple of changes. We flipped the board horizontally. It was originally vertically, and there's some significant changes in terms of adding a time and date booked, something previously that we didn't have. So now we can actually measure how long a patient has been waiting. From that, we can make a decision as to how we prioritise our list and workflow through the day. We've added a very controversial category called U categories, which has been interesting. The U categories are an incoming standard. It has been here for 2 years, but wasn't utilised. So the U categories basically say how urgently this case needs doing, which in unison with the dates booked and the times booked, we've got some quantifiable data which we never previously had. We've also added pre-op and post-op destinations, which has been hugely beneficial in terms of being able to plan where the patients are going, if the patients have got beds, so we're not waiting around with patients that do have beds and trying to do patients that don't. The outstanding investigations as well, so we can see any potential problems along with the IPC and patient issues. They've all really helped us sort of cut down that problem time in between cases where things can go wrong, things have gone missing, just delaying our workload really. That's it from me at the time.
I'll do it.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Thank you.
Probably not very technical.
So from the key learnings that we've gained at this 30-day point, all seem interlinked with the Kaizen event that we ran. The learned behaviours are because of the learned behaviour of the surgeon coming up to the booking desk to book the patient, to stop that, to when we transferred the booking form to the ward, it's obviously what Claire said about getting that communication out and obviously breaking that habit of coming because it's just what they're used to. So that was a learned behaviour. Assumptions that we assumed that the surgeons knew the correct way to fill out the form. So in the event, Nazira and Claire took time to actually fill out a form and it took 4 attempts for them to get it right, who do it, on a daily basis. So that showed a great thing to us. But also the assumption that we thought the surgical team was aware of the U categories, that everybody was on board with that. So that was highlighted in this event. The sharing of information, obviously we went to the audit meeting to present this information, and from that we realised that not everybody were aware about the U categories and we had to do more work on that. But also it helped share that information to a larger multidisciplinary team in that event, which also led to respectful behaviours. I think we've adhered to the Leeds way with how we've communicated this event and the outcomes from it, and that we have had to listen to understand, and that we've actually had to speak up for certain things, and from that we've raised awareness of certain issues and barriers that we've encountered on the way, and Nazira's going to speak more about that.
Okay, sorry, I know we're just for a couple of minutes. Just so for those non-surgeons in the room, so here is a classification of patients when they're coming into theatre. So I'll just talk a bit more about that. So at the moment it just looks like a table, but you can see that in the immediate section it's within an hour. Urgent then goes down to within hours, but no more specific than that, and expedited within 48 hours, and that should be the plan for surgery. With the new revised classification of the U codes, they've tried to give that a bit more specificity, so there is a number of hours within which you need to be making sure that that surgery is performed. So when and how has all this come about? It was the NC pod, which has been really the driving force behind this, and this is a national organisation which is a sort of a registered charity, if you like, and the idea of this is that it reviews current clinical practice, and the idea is it collates all of this information and tries to maintain and improve the current standards of care. So the current classification that NC pod have and is still existing is just as we've documented in the table before, so immediate, urgent, expedited or elective. So that's always been the known method. So since then, more associations and bodies have come out and provided information. So the Royal Colleges have been out and given us their best practice guidance of delivering emergency surgical care. And they've actually specified, and this is where the U codes have come from, so either immediate, within 3 hours, 6 hours or 18 hours. So this is where we've sort of now deviated and providing a bit more of a numerical value just as well. By doing that, I suppose it gives you an element of our sort of performance metrics and knowing whether we are meeting those targets for those patients. And since then as well, we've also got a national audit with patients undergoing laparotomies, and this is something that began back in 2012, and we've now seen the results of this, and it's very clear that it specifies in the number of hours in which patients should have their operations. There's quite a bit of information out there. So I think for us, presenting this work then highlighted that we don't really have this sort of general consensus. So there was a lot of discussion with the governance lead, and as a result, that led to discussion with NC pod themselves, and we've actually had correspondence from the chief exec of NC pod who have said that yes, they have recognised that this is an area that does need addressing, and they do need to update this classification and give specific timings. They are planning to liaise with the colleges and with the laparotomy audit team and to provide that information. And what their advice has been is that we can currently use the college guidelines and NELA, but in addition to how we feel clinically. So I think that's a really important outcome from this work that's been done by the team. So it's definitely for us making sure that we're sharing that information with all and coming through it collaboratively, so clinicians and non-clinicians, to make sure that we are giving the patients the highest level of care. I think emergency surgical care has not always been the most understood, and what we don't, I suppose, realise, the provision of emergency surgical care accounts for about 30 to 40% in most surgical specialties. So it's a huge volume of work that we do. But if there's a lack of understanding of how to deliver that or to deliver it to a high quality, I think we're not really giving our patients this, the service they deserve. So we want to make sure that we're doing that. So we, in this sort of moving forward, we're hoping that we can now collect that data, because when NC pod does provide us with that information and say, well, now these are the classifications, we will be expected, and it will be expected that we will be able to adhere to those. And by us having done this work, you would hope that the infrastructure would be in place to meet those future needs, and that we would already be delivering that high quality care. That would be the hope. Sorry, I know.
Is it that one? Thank you. You are hanging around because I've got a few questions, and I'm sure other people have got a few questions as well. So, okay, so we're going to move on to certificates. It's a word I struggle with. Certificates. So I get too many teeth sometimes. So this is a certificate of achievement for Lean for Leaders. So can I ask John Steele, the CD for Leeds Dental Institute, to come up? And can I also, alumni actually of the Lean for Leaders cohort that I went through, can I ask Heidi Farrell to come up as well? I think we're going to do photos at the end, but please do hang around, because again people might have questions around your experience over Lean for Leaders. But well done. So moving on, I think we've got some quite quick bursts through this, haven't we? In terms of has it the task you've been set 3 minutes? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we start off with Marianne Taylor, so this is the presentation around the end of advanced lean training.
Hello.
Sorry. I'll hand over to you if that's okay.
I haven't got any slides, I was just going to talk.
That's lovely.
Okay. So as part of the process for being awarded our certificates, we are asked to talk for 3 minutes or thereabouts on what we've learned and what the key challenges were and what our next steps are following our advanced lean training. Those are the bits I was planning to cover off. So for me, the course was challenging. There were classroom sessions were concentrated into several days, and there was an intense period of Gemba work. Very intense period of Gemba work. And so I had to commit a significant amount of time within a short period in order to do this. But that enabled me to immerse myself in Leeds improvement method concepts in a way you just can't do with single study days. So I would highly recommend it as a process. And we were extremely lucky to be working as a group within pharmacy, which also increased the value of that process for us all, I think. In terms of key learning, I would say it was the importance of observations. So I'm a pharmacist. I've implemented the eMed system. We have lots of data in our eMed system, which we are still trying to work out how to make the best use of. So we're not short of data, but we found we could use that data as a way to highlight an issue, and then observations came into their own in understanding the story around that data. So you always find out things you don't expect. You gain a far better understanding of our challenges with process and waste than you can do with data or with talking about data, which is the other thing we do a lot of, I think. So as the lead pharmacist for the eMeds project, I've spent most of the last 5 years of my working life inflicting a huge change on this organisation by implementing a digital system across the trust. And during the ART course, I struggled to reconcile our need for big change like that, in the form of digital transformation, with what I was learning about the Leeds improvement method. So I've come to the conclusion that we can't stop the big changes, but we need the Leeds improvement method to help us to settle that change and to demonstrate benefits by giving us the tools to observe, measure and improve process. And for me, my next steps are to continue that thinking as part of a course in digital health leadership with the NHS Digital Academy.
Yes, please. Thank you. We do have certificates for the advanced lean training, but I'll give them at the end if that's all, and everybody's done that.
I've got some slides. No, that's not me. This is me. Hi, so I'm Catherine Hughes. I'm one of the pharmacists. I've done the Lean for Leaders course, and then I went on to do the ALT. So I've got 3 minutes to give you my continuous improvement journey. It feels like a personal one as well as the tools. So 3 minutes challenge. The onion layers. So there's something about unwrapping the onion layers, and the more I use these tools, the more I feel more comfortable with them. And I think the more flexibility I realise that they provide. It feels very structured and quite hard and quite disciplined initially, and actually the more you use them, the more I've found that I've got a flexibility around them. So for those who are learning it, keep going with it. For me, a little bit like what Marianne said, I think in some ways, the Leeds Improvement Method gives us the tools to be able to tell the story of what's currently going on now. And I think there's something there that helps with the urgency for us about the change, which I think is fabulous. Brené Brown, for those of you who know her already, is a guru that I follow on leadership. And for me, there's a huge thing. It's not just about the tools. It's about how we are with each other. So courage gives us a voice, compassion gives us an ear. Without both, there's no opportunity for empathy and connection. And for me, there's no opportunity for continuous improvement either. So we're really learning this about the courage to be able to go look, see and talk about it. And actually how we're compassionate to ourselves, both as leaders and people delivering the services, and to those around us to help us to be able to move forward. I think that's key, and I think we're learning that a lot in MMPS. So using data. I've realised the value of data. I'm much more of the people and not about the data. So I now go, it's okay to use data, and actually it's really powerful. So this is just an example of one of the analyses that I did. So this is showing that there are 11 types of medicines, the way we dispense them or have them available to patients. There are 11 different types on one ward, and they're stored in 6 different places. So there's one tool, that's called a PQ analysis. And then using another tool to kind of explore that, for those of you who know, a standard worksheet, following a nurse round administering medicines. So the yellow is the nurse moving around, the patients are the dots in the beds, and actually what a mess that is, how difficult that is. So 6 locations to find medicines, how difficult that is. And I think that's something about telling the story of what's going on around medicines on wards at the moment. The other thing that I did as part of the ALT was a proof of concept of a test of change, and I think we learnt that. So Matt's, who's on next, is going to talk about some of his stuff. But rather than going straight and going, we need a big transformational change, actually Matt and I did a test of change to see if we can get use the data that we've already got in the system to be able to make medicines available to patients before they need it. So we kind of got up early one morning and came and used the e-medicines data and supplied medicines to patients one day, one ward, one morning administration round using the e-medicines report. And we supplied 7 medicines that wasn't actually on the ward before we gave them, and they were all given. And actually, if those 7 medicines hadn't been dispensed by us, those had been missed doses for patients. I did do a trial where I tried, before we did this proof of concept, I asked one of the members of the team to change the way that they worked, and they were really against it. And I realised actually that wasn't right of me, it wasn't respectful of me to ask somebody to do a different way of working. There's something about how we designed this properly. So the proof of concept has been a big deal, I think. Next steps for me. So next steps MMPS is the Harry story and how we make medicines available to patients before they need them. For me personally, I've already kind of started to move on. So some of you will have seen me on the stage doing the team leader for our first MMPS RPIW. So I kind of, in some ways, I'm already progressing my journey, and I'm excited about it. So thank you.
Another alumni from my Leeds.
Hello everybody, my name's Matthew, I'm a pharmacy technician, I'm also the department's continuous improvement specialist. I'd also like to say happy 29th of November. I cannot wait to shave this off. So I was very fortunate, like Catherine and some other colleagues, I did my Lean for Leaders and then went on to do my advanced Lean training, and that really gave me an understanding and groundwork which I could build on when I did the advanced Lean training. So the advanced Lean training that I got, the most things that I got out of it was around the power of data to tell a story using level, production and PQ analysis. And I think you've seen that when we've come and blended Harry's story using the data, the vast amount of data that we have, and actually creating a story and an urgency with that. But there's some things I'd like to talk about, and very quickly, from my PQ and the level production and PQ analysis, the data that I created. So, I took I love data, and I get really excited by it, and I took a snapshot of data, which was very difficult to get my hands on, of the 1st of April this year, looking at St James's site. 4,000 medicines were newly prescribed on that day. 4,000 newly prescribed medicines. But actually, then if you look here, my product families I've created, 25% of those medicines, so about 1,000, were needed within product family group A. So actually, right there and right then. So using some visual control, I've got some of my greens here. what I'm interested in is this line here. Actually, of those 1,000 medicines or different doses that were prescribed, only 19 different medicines make up 50% of all those different types of medicines. So actually, do we have those 19 medicines on all the wards? It's a question. But actually, by having those 19 medicines on this day, I accept that it's only a snapshot in time, but would that make the lives easier for all our patients? Would that reduce missed doses? It's just a question, and this is what I've started to ask as part of the advanced lean training. So based on this, I tried to do some level production and whether, if we had 4,000 new medicines prescribed in a day, could we actually, as a pharmacy department, supply those 4,000 medicines? And so I used non-reserved level production. And if I get this right, that means we're using up all our time, our 24-hour service, with all the time, and we've got no reserve to, if anything, if capacity increases. So bear with me, I've created this. Now, and this basically shows that we could do that. But actually, this brings me on to my trial injuries. Because if I show you this, you're just going to switch right off. And that's where I find my challenge is with how do I describe this data? How do I tell that story? So I'm sorry, I'm moving. How do I tell that story? How do I describe that? And engage with staff so we can get this level of urgency around. So this is where I think is my challenge as a continuous improvement specialist. So that links nicely to where I believe I fit in moving forward is actually my influence and skills to be able to explain this in an articulate way, but also to gather that engagement. But I'm very excited by that. Moving forward, I plan on being a team lead as part of the RPIW and going on to become a workshop lead. Thank you very much.
So hi, my name's Wayne. I'm one of the nurses who work in pharmacy. I sit under Joe Caldecott. So I completed my ALT with other pharmacy colleagues. And the key learnings that I'm missing a slide. The key learnings that bear with me, sorry. The key learnings that I picked up from completing the ALT course were things that were quite obvious being able to look back on the course prior to the learning, but being able to stand alone and take observations without actually having to record data and look at the flow involved, and just being able to stand and watch without having an input, just opened my eyes really to be able to focus on the challenges that the ward-based sort of staff are using. It also made me aware of not everything we do for patients can be deemed value added. An example of that would be I'm doing some work around IVs, which I'll come on to in a second, but the value added task for the patients receiving their antibiotics would be getting them at the right time with the right doses, and not potentially the time that it's took to prepare the medicines in the background and such like that. So being able to signify what is value added time and what isn't value added time, and see if we can reduce the non-value added time and increase what the patient wants. Another key learning point that I took was the tools that were taught in the ALT and how easily adaptable they were to using sort of everyday analysis and benchmarking. I've come onto some examples of the standard work that I've done post completing the course, and some of the detailed time observations that I've taken too. The key barriers for me, and I think it was touched upon, was the time that it took out the scheduled work that I would normally have to complete. Completing the 4-day course and having to pick up the work afterwards was quite a challenging task, and also the homework, which took a long time, but obviously it was massively beneficial. They're the only barriers that I could really see. My next steps, I'm looking at the IV administration sort of burden for nurses on adult wards. The graph on the left hand side shows just one observation that I took from J20 of a nurse preparing the IV medication in the treatment room and taking it to the patient, and how many steps were involved in actually preparing that medicine. And for continuous improvement, I'm looking at a policy change to allow single registrant to be able to administer IVs, antibiotics, and that would then affect how the standard worksheet would look, with the premise that we would reduce the need to go back to the treatment room to make up another medicine. You'd be able to make one medicine at a bedside on the trolley and then go to your next bedside, rather than having the wasted time going back to the treatment room. And that's it.
Could I ask everybody to come back up again, Mary, Catherine? Yeah. So, Mary. Thank you. Oh, wait. There you go. Congratulations. Come on. Catherine and Matthew. Okay. Can we give them another round of applause? If you could just stay there, because we're going to do some questions as well. So people may well have questions, and then we'll do some photographs at the end if that's okay. I have to say though, having just listened to your presentations, if anybody has any doubts whatsoever that the Leeds improvement method impacts on our patients and impacts on our people, then that what you've just described would really blow that out of the door. That's really it's superb work that you've undertaken there. So we're open to questions. So of all the presentations that we've heard today, the 120-day report out, the 30-day report out. So any questions from colleagues? Yeah.
Sorry, I don't have a question. It's more just a statement from the Sarah team for the RPIW. My name's Sophie. I'm the value stream manager for acute general surgical value stream. And actually, the lead time that you're describing that has only reduced to 4 hours, the 21% reduction is huge. You should be immensely proud of the work that you've done. The target initially was to meet TAC time, which is 1 hour and 42 minutes, I believe. And actually, thinking about that as a target now, it's become a high-level metric. So, for the sake of an RPIW, maybe we were being a bit ambitious. So, thank you so much for all your hard work in that value stream, in that particular RPIW, and great work.
Thank you so much.
I'm Una. I'm a lead clinician in pharmacy, and I joined this crew as part of the advanced lean training. So I have a few things to say. One, it's a great reminder to get on and finish my homework. Noted. But I'd just like to say that it's fantastic to see people who have done the training and have really put it into practice. So hopefully some of you will have heard Harry's story, which was great work these guys have all done, but also that they're doing an RPIW already, and I think that's also fantastic. I am constantly impressed by what these guys deliver, so I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you for that.
Hi, I'm Heidi Farrell, recently promoted to Head of Nursing for Patient Flow, so this is all music to my ears from all the work streams that are ongoing, and ties in nicely with improving that patient journey, getting patients home when they should be going home, and getting patients in sooner so that we're not having those prolonged waits in our emergency departments. So it's absolutely fantastic work, everybody. Really interesting. Yeah.
Any other questions at all? Yeah.
Hi, Charlie, surgical pharmacist. I was really hoping Nick might have been able to stay, but hopefully he's run off to do lots of EDANs. I just wasn't sure if he talked about his experience as the F1 to write EDANs, what he finds works really well in that process, not necessarily the role that he has, but what works really well in the EDAN process, and then maybe what doesn't work so well in terms of he's still writing EDANs in the afternoon. Is there anything that could bring that forward in the day? With my vested interest both as a pharmacist and in the discharge collaborative, I think that would be really useful because they're living in that for a week, so they're really immersed, like these guys were, in understanding it.
You're absolutely right. So Nick's gone off to do EDANs and work, and he has the crash fleet, so he's apologised he can't stay. But in terms of the work that he's doing, I think they've found that as a unit they've become quite cohesive with the acute ward, so that's given them, I think they almost feel empowered that they have that responsibility really. And I think for them now, they recognise the importance of patient flow and discharge and disseminating that information to the GP. I think sometimes it's difficult when they don't quite know the patient, but I think they're beginning to learn how to make sure the crucial information is going to the doctor and what bits of information they need. Like, you know, it's not war and peace, but it needs to be succinct. I think moving forward with this, I mean, we have recognised that there is a large volume still being done in the afternoon, but this is where we're hoping that with criteria-led discharge, so if a patient is reviewed on a morning ward round, whilst they might not be ready to leave, if the consultant may stay home, if ultrasound investigations are normal, then that will give them the ability to get that completed. So we're hoping that will be a step forward.
Any other questions at all? Could I ask Catherine, please? Catherine, could you just say a little bit more about compassionate leadership?
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. Okay, so something around how we are with each other as individuals, how we listen, compassion being listen to understand, empathy, feeling the emotion and being able to state it back to the person, and to want to do something to solve problems. So as a leader, to be able to unblock barriers. So I think the concept of listening and really listening and wanting to understand without defensiveness can be really quite challenging, particularly if you've led a service for some time, or I don't know. I think that's really hard. So I think it's the fundamentals to change.
Can I come back? Yeah. Just to tie really the two things that we've been dealing with together. Sorry, Tony Cranshaw, Outside Eyes, patient partner for the acute surgical admissions value stream. So I've been journeying with this quite a long time now. And it was music to my ears. In RPIW 3, I identified, my key learning was the importance of clinicians becoming clinicians and of patients becoming patients. What we've seen big time is clinicians becoming clinicians, developing their understanding of their own work, their own jobs and so on. That requires enormous emotional intelligence.
It does.
And it requires also a kindness to each other, which is really important. Recently I was at a CQC summit proclaiming the good being done at Leeds. But one of the other speakers was talking about the whole issue of management, and he was from the NHS Academy. And the thing that he directed our attention to was compassionate leadership, and strongly recommended that we looked at the work of Michael West from the University of Lancaster. So just to feed that back in, there are two things. So the need for kindness, the need for emotional intelligence, and the need for compassionate leadership, and those have got to come together. And it can't be only while things are going well, it's got to be all the time.
It's actually more important when it's not going well,
It
isn't
is.
it, really? And we need to remember that. And thank you very much for that. Respectful behaviours and the things that Catherine was talking about is absolutely fundamental to the Leeds Improvement Record. But more than that, it's the culture of this organisation in terms of our Leeds Way values, and we must hold on to that. I've got one question for the guys at the back. So it possibly is an unfair question, but whilst we were talking, I was thinking some time ago we tried to set up internal professional standards in relation to how quickly patients were accessing theatre when they really needed to. And I was when you were talking, I was thinking we struggled to do it, didn't we, Rob?
So actually, I'm seeing David on. So sorry to jump in. So I'm seeing David on Monday to talk about new codes, because there is just some nervousness about assigning a time to a patient to allow us to create that start.
It's not so much new codes. I think what I was really encouraged about, and I'd just be interested to hear your views at the back, was a greater level of transparency about when patients are ready, when they need their surgery and so on. And I just wondered if you've got any observations around that.
So from the information now that's documented on the board, we know that when the patient's booked and how urgent that patient is. So by assigning the guidelines of the U categories, we can then identify the priority of the patients, and that's on a wider perspective. It's helped so much with the surgeons that are coming up to our department that they've got that availability to go and look on the board and see which patients are urgent to come into theatre, and they then know where the level playing field is for where their patients will be booked onto that list.
Is that's going to replace that bunker scrabble that used to happen on a...
Yeah.
Is that right?
So the initial one that we brought in also helped with that, because originally it was just a list in a folder that was quite secretive, and that's what we wanted to get away from, that we've got that visual aspect of it, and it also helps on a department level as well, because before, if other theatres had finished, because it was like, right, you will do this case, they were a bit reluctant to come forward. Now that they can go and see a board and see what is available, they are more likely to come and say, right, we've finished our list, we'll do this patient for you, which is really fantastic work.
Am I right in thinking that initial board was your lean for leaders work?
Yeah.
So that is continuous improvement, isn't it? And building on the success that you've had and continuing.
The other important thing to point out is the relationship with the clinicians. When you talk about transparency, it's about, we have to be really honest about what we're all trying to achieve together, and calling it as it is, really. And it isn't about saying somebody's doing a good job or a bad job, it's about saying how can we do this better. And I think it's taken quite a lot of courage and bravery to do what we've done, and I think we've been very dignified in the way we've done it as well, and we're very determined to hopefully make that process better.
Thank you. And very, very finally then, so our lead for leaders Rocky works today. Any top tips for anybody else that's getting to the route that's been on module 6 for the last 9 months? Any top tips for anybody to get through? Heidi, John?
Heads down. Notice how she mentioned mine. I've been on this journey a while. It's just focused, isn't it? Time. You just need to have that understanding with your managers. Like you said, you've got to have that time to do the work as well.
John,
stick at it.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, as Jimmy knows, I always try and keep things simple, and that's don't try and do something too big. Try and do it what's achievable, because it is time pressure. We're all busy, so it's try to get that homework done in time.
I think that's really wise. I think when I did mine, I had to correct myself a number of times from going to concentrated. Can I just ask everyone to give everybody another round of applause, please? It's been really
Turn that off.
How do we do that?
Turn that off.
We're coming in.
Here.
I was said we've gone on to do something else. Where are we going?
Get rid of that off the screen.
So it says me to... I can't say the word certificate. Honestly, I've done it before.
So how embarrassing is this? I think Matthew was on our course.
I know. I know. That's what I mean. It's man's been trained.
Not long.
No, I'm not. I'll stand at the outside.
Do you want to stand in the middle?
No,